Welcome to another episode, Roofing Right with Dave and Wally. You are Dave.
And you are Wally.
So Dave, today we're going to talk about pitch pockets, sealant pockets. There's all kinds of terminologies out there for them. So right now, this is the older one that we have. So we came out with our newer one.
Right.
Which is a two-part.
Yes.
A lot smaller, a lot easier to weld.
Yes.
This is roughly what?
That's got to be at least 80 mils.
80 or 90 mils,
Yeah.
and they're a bear to weld. This is more lighter long, like 55 mils roughly, right in that thickness. So a lot easier to weld. And plus it's two pieces. So if I have a bigger pitch pan, I can make it bigger, I can cut it down, make it smaller. But you're still going through the same process. You're gonna weld it. What else do we have to do once we're done with this?
You mean done welding?
Yes.
And then have everything, the flange welded,
Yep.
prime it.
Prime it, fill it with our filler.
Right.
So again, I'll just get this welded. Now there's gonna be a little trick to welding this.
Now, obviously, we're just talking about this.
Right.
But you need base attachment.
Base attachment, screws and
Right.
plates around this, underneath of it. So there's the tricky part right here to weld is this angle change. See how flexible this is.
Right.
So a little trick, I learned how to do these. Take a piece of lumber, piece of insulation, you know, the width of this, and kind of wedge it in here. So when I'm welding this, I got something to push against.
Makes sense.
Okay. Now, if your pipe's in your way, you can, like, if I want to center this, that pipe's gonna be right in my way.
Right.
I can cut a smaller piece and wedge it in. I'm just gonna slide this over. I'm gonna do these angle changes first, get these welded, then slide where I want it, then do the flange.
Well, and if you have a bigger obstacle in the middle, you can always take this and push it back against that.
Right against it and use that for
and
support.
use that for support, yeah.
Now these are made of unsupported material, so they're not gonna take that much heat. Again, it's an angle change weld, which I'll do the one in the front here in a minute. It's gonna be a tough weld. Make sure you get that angle change. Slide this down. Again, everybody's gonna kind of find their own way how to do this. Kind of the way I kind of figured out how to do it. Now I can kind of recenter it. This process to start welding this down. Now I've got a flap right here. If you would be so kind to hold that flap up. I'm gonna give this a little tap so it doesn't move on me. Give it a tack down here. Over here. All right. Now we only require you weld 1.5 inches all the way around this, right, Dave? That's our minimum hand weld?
Correct.
Me personally, I'm probably gonna be weld this whole thing down. Is it gonna take me longer? Probably. But if I weld this thing down solid, if I get a little void here, it's gonna be harder for that water to get back in there and get a leak. You can only weld 1.5 inches.
Right.
But the problem is when you put the filler in there, if you only weld out 1.5 inches, it's not welded solid all the way back to here. That filler could get in there and cause like a bubble.
Right.
This filler's gonna run under there. If you wanna go that route, once we prime this, we have to prime the inside just like our older pitch pan. Once it's all welded, take some Flex Seal and caulk the inside of this to seal that up prior to filling that. And that's not gonna let that filler get out to your weld if you're only welding 1.5 inches all the way around here.
Correct.
Okay?
Yep.
And then go off with the filler. Now, if you're this size, if you're full size, obviously, I'm probably gonna need a little more filler. If I cut this down to a smaller size,
Right.
I won't need as much filler.
But you still need 1 inch between the
An
pocket.
Any penetration, inch between any penetration, if they're inside here, inch between the outside of the penetration. Let me finish welding this up. Now, kind of a nice feature we have here, we always talk about rounding your corners. So we already have this rounded for you. And obviously if you cut it down, you're gonna have to round your corners that way. This is how it comes, the corners are already rounded. Okay, now we have a T-joint area here. What do we always want to show the inspector when he's looking at the roof?
We want to see the crease in the T-joint.
Yes. Show us the creasing. So now we've got it all welded. What do we have to do now?
Prime it.
Prime it. We have to prime these?
Yes, prime everything.
What if this is a tear off and you got insulation or tar on this pipe?
Better clean it off.
Gotta be cleaned off. That also has to be primed also, right?
Right. When in doubt, prime it out. I have stirred the primer. You'll notice, maybe you can notice, it's lumpy like my mom's gravy. Don't worry about it, okay? Just stir it, get it somewhat consistent, then prime it. Notice how I'm going out here with the primer. That way we can overfill it, and also the inspector can see the primer.
This is one area where if we don't care if it looks pretty.
Right.
We want this to function.
Right. I think we're done. What do you think?
Looks good to me.
Perfect.
Okay, now we'll let the primer dry.
Yep.
And then we can proceed with the filling. Nice thing about this filler is if you only use part of a bag, you can reseal it on the next job. So how long, once you open this, what's the shelf life on it?
Year.
Year? And once it's been open, right?
Right.
As long as it's not left in your truck and it freezes, right?
Well, that's probably
going to be a block of ice.
Yeah. Right, yeah. I don't think you're having a problem with that in, the South, but.
So, pretty simple. Again, you can get really crazy. I mean, you could frost this up, make it look like a cake, but we want it definitely to overflow.
And depending on the penetration itself, if you cut this or not, you may need more than one bag, you may need less than one bag.
Yeah, depending on the size, if you cut that down. So one bag's not gonna quite do it. That's what we want though, right there, encapsulating the whole thing. Now, we've run into the situation, we talk about this a lot during our trainings, let's say these pipes are tight, right? We always try and stress, obviously the building owner's probably not gonna pay to have those relocated, but you gotta get them apart. Now, you don't wanna break them.
No.
Sometimes easier said than done, but wedge them apart the best you can. Take a piece of wood, a piece of insulation, get them apart so you can get the filler down inside there.
Right.
So what do you think, looks good?
Well, yeah.
Stay tuned for next episodes of Roofing Right, Dave and Wally.